the hills above 100 meters would be considered Aravallis, which is extremely short-sighted. This is the death knell for the Aravallis if the mafia gets its way through. This is just the beginning. I mean, they will eventually get to Himalayas also. So many species are endemic to the Aravallis. You can't even, bring them back from extinction. So and they play a very, very critical role in the entire in managing or in balancing the entire ecosystem. We have already be it the leopards, be it the civet cat, be it the insects, be it the reptiles, they all have a very critical role to play.
Who stands to gain from this ruling the most?
Even if some good officer comes in who wants to take some action, by the time he gets the entire machinery moving, it's time for him to go. What is more important to protect what we already have? Can you even take a guess how many forests are being chopped down right now all across the country? 80 forests. 80 forests are being felled. Politicians have big stakes in these projects. There is a huge nexus between the mafia and the politicians. Many politicians here own mining companies. The government cannot fool aware citizens.
Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Hindustan Times and my name is Aisha Varma. The Aravalli Range is one of the world's oldest mountain systems, running about 2,500 kilometers from Gujarat through Rajasthan and Haryana up to Delhi. But how old is it? Estimates peg it to be over 2.5 billion to 3 billion years of age. That's much older and much wiser than both you and I. For Gurugram, these hills work as a shield. They moderate temperatures, reduce dust, and function as a critical green lung and water buffer for Delhi NCR. But a ruling from the Supreme Court has forced environmentalists to fight with the allowance of mining in hills less than 100 meters in height. The Forest Survey of India has reported that of 12,081 hills mapped across multiple states, only 1,048 meet the 100-meter criterion. This means around 90% of the Aravallis get wiped off the map of what's considered as the Aravalli Range. We have Jyoti Raghavan, a member of the Aravalli Bachao Citizens Movement, joining us at this point to discuss this important matter. Ms. Raghavan, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me over.
First and foremost, for those who are unversed, what is the Supreme Court's ruling and what are the protests about?
So, as per the ruling, of course, like you said it, only the hills above 100 meters would be considered Aravallis, which is extremely short-sighted because and also this is technically flawed, this ruling, because the ruling says that the hills 100 meters above the local relief would be considered the Aravallis, wherein if you technically only you can only measure the height of any mountain from above the sea level. So A, this is technically flawed, and B, of course, this is the death knell for the Aravallis, and it's going to wipe off 90% of the Aravallis in Haryana and almost 99% of it in Rajasthan, because out of some 1 lakh, over a lakh hills in Rajasthan, only I think 1,000 something meet the criterion of 100 meters, which means 99% would be wiped off.
Who stands to gain from this ruling the most?
Obviously, in Rajasthan, it is the mining mafia, because it's been working very intensely to this is a land grab in the name of the change of definition. The mining mafia in Rajasthan, we have, and the builder mafia in Haryana, because after all, who are they going to mine for? It's for construction, right? And so it's going to benefit these two states the most, the mining mafia in Rajasthan and the builder mafia in Haryana. And as Aravalli Bachao Citizen Movement, we have been fighting legal cases against illegal mining and encroachments. And for our cases, we have traveled to many areas in Rajasthan, and I have seen up close, the intensity and the level of mining that is happening there, which is against the which goes against the ban Supreme Court has put on mining. So it is very unfortunate, but if the mafia gets its way through.
I'm curious, if no changes are made to the top court's order, what could the Aravali landscape look like in 20 to 30 years? What could NCR look like?
20 to 30 years is a very far-fetched, estimate. In the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be all barren because, once already, despite mining being illegal, it is happening at a much bigger scale than we would like to believe. And once this is legalized, you can only imagine the level of destruction that is going to take place. It's going to be unprecedented. And in just 5 to 10 years, we are going to see the ramifications.
Many are asking why there's even a need to define the Aravalis, saying that we don't define the Himalayas in a similar fashion. So why do you think this is being allowed?
This is just the beginning. I mean, they will eventually get to Himalayas also, as far as I know them. But why the definition? Because they want to grab the Aravalis once and for all. They have been trying their best in the last, it has really intensified. The scheming to grab the Aravalis has intensified. Sometimes it is in the, there is a landfill, so they claim there is a need for a waste to energy plant because the landfill is too big to be tackled by any other methods like bioremediation or anything. So the waste to energy plant is the only solution. The landfill already stands on 32 acres of the Aravalis, and the WT would take up another 25 acres. And we had tried fighting against WT in Supreme Court 5 years ago. Of course, we lost the case. So this way or that way, then came there was another proposal or suggestion from the government to remove the word forest from their records, and we had filed an intervention in that matter also, and we managed to protect 30,000 hectares of Aravalis in 2022. And then then came Zoo Safari in the name of conservation. So this way or that way, they have been trying to come after the Aravalis. And this is, I mean, every threat we tried to ward off, another one would come up. But this is the mother of all threats. I mean, we stand to lose. I mean, they are going to wipe out the entire Aravalis. It's like they did not ever exist even.
Along the same lines, considering the levels of pollution in the NCR, why are efforts being made to further worsen or degrade our biodiversity?
I think you should be asking this question to our policymakers. Why can't they see what has been unfolding to, I've been saying this, that officially Rajasthan has lost around 32 or 35 of its hills in the last 40 years. And these are the official figures. And we are already seeing the implications in entire Delhi NCR. The pollution has intensified. The storms have intensified, and there's desertification happening. When a storm happens, if you see the contents of the dust that has flown into your house, you will notice a lot of sand in it. So Thar has started inching closer and closer. Pollution we are already seeing. We might blame it on Punjab or other states, but Rajasthan losing its hills that were acting as a barrier between Delhi NCR and the Thar Desert, and so that factor is also responsible for the levels of pollution that we are seeing. And of course, the trees also act as a huge shield. We are already seeing the effects. And we've also lost a lot of biodiversity. And if this ruling, gets implemented, we we will, everybody is just talking about the damage it is going to cause to humans. But what about the ones for whom the Aravallis are home? Nobody is paying attention to them. We are going to wipe out their entire existence. And so many species are endemic to the Aravallis. You can't even, bring them back from extinction. So and they play a very very critical role in the entire in managing or in balancing the entire ecosystem. We have already be it the leopards, be it the civet cat, be it the insects, be it the reptiles, they all have a very critical role to play, and we have already wiped out so many of them. And how are we, our survival also depends on their survival, which is not something our policy makers are even bothered about. So this is a question I would also like to pose to them. What were they thinking, or what are they thinking when they, take such decisions?
Would you have more details about what exactly the wildlife of the Aravallis are going through at this moment and which particular species are at risk?
Pretty much all are at risk. Be it the leopards, palm civet cats are, the numbers have really dwindled, despite whatever the forest department is claiming. And there are actually, conspiracy. Sometimes I feel there is actually a conspiracy going on to wipe them out or to drive them away. Recently, we were in a forest in the Gurgaon Aravallis to collect some evidence of the wildlife presence in that area, because we were planning to take on this big builder that's coming up with yet another project in the Aravallis. So our team was there to collect evidence, and it was the peak of summers, and there are these big क्या कहते हैं, होदी जैसे बनाया होता है उन्होंने in the forest, which is the responsibility of the forest department to keep them replenished at all times with water. They were all completely dry. What is happening till the time there is wildlife presence in the forest, no builder can touch the forest. So what they are doing, purposely drying up these water sources of the wildlife, so that the wildlife either perishes or it is forced to migrate to some other forest in search of water, because water is critical. They cannot survive without it. So there is an entire, plan of action in place to make this happen, to hand over the Aravallis to the builder mafia, and we have seen it up close. And earlier, when I used to go for my walks in the forest, I would see a humongous variety of birds. There would be rock eagle owls. There would be parakeets, orioles, and nilgai, and I the jackals. They have all, I don't see them anymore. It has happened right in front of my eyes in the last 6 years only. I have been going to Aravallis in the last 6 years, and the last 6 years I have seen a huge decline in terms of wildlife biodiversity. I used to be, every time we would enter the forest, there used to be a flock of peacocks. They are no longer there. So and most of the people are not even aware, and how critical a role these creatures play in keeping the balance.
And what some also seem to be ignoring is the fact that the animals who live in those environments, when they get pushed out, they get pushed into city limits, where human animal conflict also then tends to increase, because at large the population is not extremely aware of how to deal with wildlife and what needs to be done, what doesn't need to be done. So that again just creates
exactly where I live, recently I have rescued so many animals in the last 3-4 years like never before. Snakes. I rescued a nilgai last year that had wandered into our colony, our colony is in the middle of the city. I don't even know how that nilgai calf landed here, and apparently it had probably wandered off somewhere from Bhunsi or some other forest. But all these forests are pretty far off from where I live. How did it even make its way to my colony? Is
exactly.
I'm still baffled. And and it's not just nilgai. We've had so many snakes. We've had, I mean, road pe mere, where I work, there a jackal wandered into my you know uh, property in search of water because there's no water in the forest anymore. All the water bodies have either been encroached upon, some temple built around it, or they have been purposely dried up. So obviously, and what happens, it's, because I have been spreading enough awareness. So now people call me whenever they see wildlife in the colony, whenever they see a snake or some other, monitor lizard. So they call me and I go and rescue. But before that, what would happen? They would immediately kill.
Yes.
So that is very unfortunate. On one hand, these poor creatures are losing their homes, and on the other hand, they are losing their lives also.
It's also very important for rescuers to be more visible because of what you just said. People know who to call at the end of the day. One other thing that we want to ask you is, what are the main gaps between what the courts and the Environment Ministry mandate and what the state and local authorities actually implement?
The gap is, we cannot really pinpoint to any particular gaps. The biggest gap I personally see is obviously that we all see is the implementation. And, there is biggest gap that I see is the lack of will to implement. And,
Okay.
and, uh, you know, uh, and the biggest issue, another big issue that I see is because most of the agencies that are responsible for implementation are government agencies. And government agency mein, I every time I go and deal with one officer, we tell him the whole Ram Kahani of the whole situation. Next time we go, that officer has been transferred. So, there is no accountability. There is, because their, spans here, their duration of service here is so short. It's just 1 or 2 years. And by the time, so there is, even if some good officer comes in who wants to take some action, by the time, there, he gets the, entire machinery moving, it's time for him to go. So that is one gap I have noticed as an activist, or as a as somebody who has been doing some work in my colony also. That is one thing I feel, and I don't know how to tackle it. Either we increase their जो transfer का span to 5 years at least, they will have to serve in every place they get posted to. Some such rule has to come in. Otherwise, they will keep moving from one place to another. They will keep taking arbitrary decisions and walk away without any repercussions.
Exactly. So then there's no continuity either.
Yeah, exactly.
So, as per the top court's November 20th judgment, I actually want to quote a portion in this, essentially saying, in recognition of the ecological importance of the Aravali Ranges, the MOEFCC has also launched the Aravali Green Wall Project. This is essentially going to be increasing green cover in a 5-kilometer buffer across 29 districts as proposed. What is the perspective of environmentalists about this project?
I mean, such projects are important, they are necessary, but at the same time, what is more important to protect what we already have, and we are not doing that. And all these projects, you cannot chop off. Even right now, we are at the peak of pollution. We are at the, it's becoming, I am not able to survive without my inhaler even for a day. And this is in this situation, and every time I nowadays, whenever I pass through Southern Peripheral Road or the road around Huda city center, I'm seeing these huge trees being, butchered mercilessly for some, either metro extension project or stormwater line project. And these are our biggest shields against pollution, and this is the fate they are being met with. And you just cannot replace a 10 or 20-year-old tree with a sapling. It will just not be the same. So I mean, we need to plant more trees and more saplings. We cannot plant trees, we can only plant saplings. That will, if taken care of well enough, for 3 years at least, will grow into, someday grow into trees. So this term has to change. It's not tree plantation, it is sapling plantation. Tree plantation gives the image that, one tree is being replaced with a fully grown tree. That is not happening. A
Mm.
fully grown tree, which is an entire ecosystem in itself, is being replaced with a little sapling. Just pay, not even an insect is coming and sitting, and there is this tree, which is not only serving a huge purpose to the humans, but it is also, being home and providing sustenance to so many other creatures. A sapling can never do that. Why do we even call it a tree plantation? It is a sapling plantation. So this green wall project, I see it as an eyewash. You know, for all the destruction that has been happening, it's a distraction. It's just people somewhere we feel little less guilty for doing what we are doing, thinking that okay, we are replacing it with you, or we are coming up with more trees, bigger number of trees. You cannot replace a fully grown 10-year-old tree with 50 saplings. That doesn't happen.
So, what, in your opinion, can urban residents in Gurugram and Delhi practically do on a legal, political, and social level to support the protection of the Aravalis?
See, there are so many things people can do. They can actually come out little more and start taking their representatives to task.
Okay.
Because right now, the one of the biggest reasons for their laxity is, or lack of accountability, is that there is no one is asking them to be accountable, right? Nobody is asking the counselor, why the civil situation, or the civic situation of the city is so bad. The counselor is happily living in a cocoon, and he is making his millions through the contractors, this way or that way. Nobody is even holding him accountable. Nobody, if 50 people land at his office, be it the counselor or be it the MLA or be it the MP, if 50 people or 100 people land up at their offices and demand accountability, how far can they run? And what they should be talking more about serious issues than, I was hearing, we recently had our Aravali Bachao citizens gathering to discuss this new ruling that had come on 20th November, and barely, I think, 15 or 20 people showed up. And somebody was telling me that there is some new bakery, some foreign bakery that has opened its shop in Gurgaon, and there was a 2-kilometer long line since midnight waiting for that bakery to open. Can you imagine? So, I mean, look at the priorities of the citizens, which is so disappointing, which is so disheartening for someone who cares. The apathy is appalling. It is truly disappointing. The priorities. A bakery shop is more important than saving your forest. So they need to have their priorities right. They need to understand that their voice matters. First of all, you might think, क्या होगा अगर हम जाएंगे, and क्या होगा, वो तो कुछ सुनेंगे नहीं हमारी. But when 100 people land up and speak, our representatives are bound to listen. They will be compelled to listen. How could they not? So, and yeah, of course, keep sharing, keep following, or become part of whatever, आपके area में whosoever is trying to make a difference. Go out and support them. Go out and, talk about their work, create awareness about their work. These are the few things, but first of all, get your priorities right.
What is the larger plan here? Let's say hypothetically, if the Supreme Court's ruling doesn't get overturned.
The larger plan by the mafia or by the activists?
No, say by the environmentalists.
The larger plan is we are all set to file our case. We were to file a review, first to file a review of challenging the order. We were going to do that yesterday, but we realized somebody else has already done it. So now we will be straight away filing the writ petition in January. The courts are closing. I believe from today or tomorrow, the courts are closing for winter. And once they open up, at least, this is the plan of action. Our group is going to, this is the we have thought of, but I'm not too aware of what the others are, what path others are planning to take. But this is our plan of action, that we are going to, file a writ petition. We are going to not let it pass through that easily.
So you've already touched upon this earlier when we spoke about it towards the beginning of this conversation, but could other similar landscapes be at risk if this ruling doesn't change?
Of course, they are already at risk. I was watching some video the other day wherein some activist had revealed that how many can you even take a guess how many forests are being chopped down right now all across the country? 80 forests. 80 forests are being felled for various mining and many other projects. And how many states do we have? 28, 29, and 82 forests are being felled. So they are already meeting the similar fate. The only difference is that now it will be legal, it will be lawful, and there wouldn't be anything that anyone will be able to do if it is not challenged right away and if it is not stopped in its tracks right away.
Despite court bans and restrictions, I'm curious, why do illegal mining and encroachment still continue in parts of Gurugram, Faridabad, and Nuh as well? Are there not enough people to overlook these matters? Do more departments need to be set up? In a country of more than 1 billion people, is there a shortage of manpower?
Absolutely. That being one of the reasons that there is indeed a shortage of manpower. And, of late, in many departments, in education department and in many government departments, I've been hearing that there is a new trend of ad hocs. Earlier, people would be, after serving a certain period, they would be made permanent. Now they are being, made to work as ad hocs for, almost a decade, more than a decade, just to save on the perks that the government will have to extend to them if they become permanent. So of course there is and that is obviously causing a lot of disappointment amongst a lot of people. So there are not too many people coming forward to get into government jobs, that being one of the reasons. And there is shortage. And another bigger reason is why it is being allowed to happen, or why it is being allowed to continue to happen, is because across Gurgaon, at least Gurgaon, Nuh, and many other places, politicians have big stakes in these projects. There is a huge nexus between the mafia and the politicians. Many politicians here own mining companies. Many politicians here own construction companies. So obviously they are going to try it and benefit their tribe, their own people. So that is one of the biggest reasons. So and we all know how the judiciary works. We all know it's mostly the ruling government that manages to, or that influences how the institutions work. So I mean, as in my work as somebody who has been seeing a lot of things unfolding on ground, I know this is a harsh reality that many of these projects have the politicians have stakes in these projects, be it the building projects or the mining companies, or so many of them own crushers and the equipment mining which they lease out. So they are making their money through it is very beneficial for them, the entire scenario. So it is being allowed to continue.
Are you working with international organizations such as the WWF, for example, to bolster progress of the movement?
Not really. We have purposely avoided working with any foreign organizations or even accepting funds. Like we fight cases, we typically we send out an appeal for funds to Gurgaon people, and we pool in our own resources, 6-7 of us, the core team members, and whatever we fall short of, we make an appeal to the citizens. And we have purposely avoided either collaborating or reaching out to any foreign organizations, because we just to be on the safer side of law, because we know how things work now. A small little loophole can be found, and we can be cornered basis on that. So we have purposely avoided any such action or activity.
Ms. Raghavan, thank you so much for joining us and explaining the entire matter to us. There's, of course, so much more to learn about this. So much more is going to be happening as the courts also open after winter vacation. But thank you
Yes.
for speaking with us.
Thank you. This is going to be a long battle. Just be prepared. That is all I can say. And I would urge everyone to please, at least keep track of things, get their priorities right, and be aware, because a government cannot fool aware citizens. Thank you.